Morning, everyone, and hope you are having a amazing cold day. Okay, my apologies for being late. I was unable to figure out how to connect the microphone. Yes, cold weather is not Cherie's most favorite thing under the sun. So I am hoping everybody could hear me at this point in time. Um, Okay. So today we are going to be discussing the concept of mental health in the workplace. Firstly, I would like to apologize. We were supposed to do this yesterday, and along with yesterday was supposed to be Bianca Mayring, who is a TRE consultant, and would have added a whole different dynamic to this discussion on mental health. But alas, Vodacom decided to have fiber issues in the Bermuda Triangle of bad behavior. And well, well, yes, fiber issues are interesting at best, especially when you're staring at the circle of blue death. So, my apologies for that. I am hoping that we can schedule another session with Bianca and that we can have various chats because ultimately these are important discussions, not only about mental health, but aspects of what comes into the workplace via mental health issues. And the reason why I believe we do need to have this discussion is honestly, I haven't had to deal with accommodations much concerning mental health matters in the workplace over the last, I want to say, 5 years. But in the recent times, there has been a intense increase in mental health matters in the workplace as well as educators needing accommodation. And I think that is something that we really do need to discuss because it's difficult. It's not an easy subject. It's not something that is like in you having a bad performance week or a bad performance term and we need to deal with it. This is mental health. It affects your health, it affects your emotions, it affects your ability to cognitively reason. So it affects every aspect of the workplace, especially for an educator who is standing in front of learners and doing one on one teaching, maybe in the preschool sector or maybe in the high school sector, but doing that one on one teaching. It's constant happening in a classroom. So, mental health makes it very difficult when you haven't learned coping skills. But it's not always just you needing to learn coping skills, it's also accommodation that needs to take place from the workplace. So, we're going to have that discussion and we're going to probably have a few more of these and we're going to look at ultimately the matter of mental health in the workplace. So for today, I'm going to be taking you through the discussion rather than making it about traditional presentations, traditional share your screen and things like that. I want to have a discussion because discussions make it a lot easier to have when there isn't suddenly a workspace being shared, there isn't documents being shared, legalization being shoved down people's throats, and things like that. I just want to communicate how we deal with mental health in the workplace. So, we're going to look at the leadership side of things, we're going to look at the employee relations side of things. We're going to look at the occupational health and safety side of this. And then we're going to mostly look at the human side of it. And lastly, we're going to look at the learner side of it. Because at the end of the day, let me be honest, our learners know when something is not right in a classroom. Our learners know when there are challenges. Maybe a teacher that is absent often because she is struggling, or may it be when a teacher is absolutely overwhelmed in the classroom. So our learners know. So let's deal with the learner aspects as well. Okay. So why are we talking about mental health in schools? Well, we talk about mental health because the world's changed. Back in the day, we didn't discuss mental health. Back in the day, mental health was something you dealt with in isolation. And at the end of the day, it didn't really help our schools because what we got was absolutely burnt out teachers. Um, I know many educators who have left the sector for very core reasons. And many people are going to say, oh, it's because of mental health, or it's because of health issues, or it's because of stress. But here's the thing, our educators are struggling, our principals are struggling, our school owners are struggling, our learners are struggling. And we need to look at how to integrate this new normal of open mental health struggles into a sector that really relies on people being functional. Okay. You cannot be an educator and hide in the corner, rocking yourself calmly, going, sweet kitty, soft kitty, I can do this. No, because our kids need us. As much as many days I think that's what many teachers want to do, we can't. We really, really can't. So I really want us to look at how mental health has changed, firstly. What also changed in society that has increased this mental health change. Okay. So when we look at what creates mental health, is targets called anxiety. Okay. And anxiety while being an educator, and I've dealt with anxiety while being in management, and I understand what mental health feels like to the person dealing with it, but I also know what it feels like to the management team having to deal with the person who is dealing with mental health. Okay. And they're actually not separate because there is this constant battle that goes on because management wants performance and educator wants handheld, and the two need to somehow mesh. Okay. So what we're discussing today is, although challenging, it's actually a good thing to be open and honest and discuss it. Real frank discussions allow us to firstly heal as a sector, heals individuals, heals management teams, and secondly, real frank discussions allow us to know what we're dealing with. I have dealt with, in the last 3 months, um, three different accommodations, and each accommodation, what the employee wanted was not what the employer could give at that point in time. And was the employer wrong? No. Was the employee wrong? No, because each is at their own space and in their own growth journey. Businesses also go through a journey just as much as we as individuals go through journeys. Okay. So when we looking at the mental health side of things, the employee wanted accommodation. They wanted the free reign to, when they are not in a good space, to not come to work, to have the sick leave accommodation, to have the relaxation on attendance, to have a change in their working hours, and they wanted their hand held. Is it wrong? No. Okay. Is wanting somebody to say to you, it's okay, I'm walking this journey with you. We spend 8 hours of a day together, if not more. So I am going to be walking this journey with you. But at the end of the day, what the employer wanted was they understood the need for accommodation. They were willing to relax on the sick leave, where if the person needed instant sick leave, they were willing to give that. But they were also wanting permanency, they were wanting performance, and they were wanting somebody who was willing to achieve their KPIs. And what a challenge that discussion becomes. Because at the end of the day, the employee has the right to ask for that accommodation, but the employer also has the right to ask for performance. So mental health doesn't wipe away the need for you to perform and achieve your KPIs. Let me say that again. Mental health, perform or to reach your KPIs. Okay. When an employee says to you, I don't know what to do anymore, I don't know how to act, feeling overwhelmed, you as an employer need to be open, honest with your expectation, and not allow yourself either to be overwhelmed by the situation. So I can remember sitting in a training, or actually, the training wasn't a while ago, or too long ago. I'm actually going to tag the lady in this, and she brought up the conversation of fed up leave, and it was actually a very interesting point she raised, because she said her staff come into her office and they say, "I'm fed up. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. I can't." And honestly, my answer was the professional answer. My answer was, we look at KPIs, you have a job description, you follow the process. You don't want to perform, you either go on unpaid leave or you can resign. And that was my honest answer. I'm not even going to lie about it. But as I left that training and I suddenly had to deal with three accommodations in less than 3 months, I realized that we were looking at something way more complex than people just saying, I don't want to do my job anymore. It was the thought that employees actually were saying, I can't do my job because I'm over me. My cognitive ability to function has just gone, and everything just seems to be too much. And I just realized that's where her staff were coming to her and saying, I'm fed up. I'm fed up. I'm fed up with life. I'm fed up with stress. I'm fed up with bad behavior of the children. I'm fed up. That was their version of overwhelmed. And I realized this is where we, as human resources or management, educational management, we need to start looking at how we interpret the concept of mental health into the workplace, being schools and educational institutions. So, without dragging this on too long, let's get into everything. So, what do we actually mean when we say mental health? So, when we say mental health, many people automatically think mental illness. No, I am not talking about mental illness. It's broader than that. I am talking about stress, grief, anxiety, exhaustion, workplace conflicts, trauma, burnout, personal difficulties, financial difficulties, relationship difficulties, or overwhelming workloads. Without necessarily having a mental health issue diagnosed, employees can still be struggling. And sometimes a person can be functionally perfect, well on the outside, but internally they are cracking at the seams. And remember, while you are trying to hold it all together as an employee, and I can say this because I've been that employee, when you're trying to hold it all together on the outside, not show anybody that anything is wrong, totally just take your tablets every morning, take your tablets every night, function, because that's what the world needed. When you crack so badly on the inside, it's going to spill out. It is going to. And we can't tell our employees how it is allowed to spill out because it's going to spill. Okay? It is. What we need to do is we need to manage it. Okay? I'm not asking you as an employer to become a psychologist. Hell no. Please. Okay. You don't need to do that. You don't need to go and study as a psychologist. You don't need to get a counseling qualification. You don't need to do any of that. What you need to do is you need to be open, honest, and a listening ear. Okay? So while you feel like you're playing the role of a psychologist, understand you're not. And honestly, I'm not a psychologist either. I can listen, I can guide, I can counsel, I can put action plans in place, but I'm not a psychologist. I cannot diagnose mental health, and therefore, whatever I say today, understand is not about diagnosis, it's not legal. Um, it's not legal terminology in the sense of I'm not saying this is how you got to deal. Each case will always be a case by case situation. The three that I've dealt with in the recent time, let me tell you, each one of them, although similar, had very different accommodation requirements. Okay. So at no point can you have one case scenario and think it's going to work on every employee. It will never and cannot. Okay. So, our responsibility is to observe, engage, support, manage the workplace appropriately, and refer when necessary. So, when that employee cracks at the seams and it spills out, your responsibility at that moment is handing the tissues and referring them to a medical professional. Okay. Don't discuss medical health issues within the workplace because it creates a fine line that can very much be crossed and be said it's judgmental or you're using it against them and things like that. So never diagnose and never discuss mental health, especially mental health matters. So it's spilling out, send them off to a medical professional and say, here we are. This is what I'm advising you. Go speak to your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, I will refer you to a doctor, and make sure that that professional can help them. So it's not going to help sending them to a podiatrist when they probably need a GP and a counselor. Okay, um, send them on in the right path. Okay, so I also want to look at what is the legal framework say, because ultimately, and in one of my accommodations, we picked it up quite easily, and it was rather sad to say that we saw it. Was that the young girl wanted to use accommodation to actually stumble the employer. And let me just quickly do this because Matthew has now just walked into my frame. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Um, so what specifically happened was is this young girl had only taken two legal frameworks, and from there she actually created this what seemed like a environment in which she wanted the frameworks to stumble the employer. And I'd luckily picked it up quite easily because obviously having dealt with these type of situations previously, because this was my last accommodation, it also was that I could pick through the girl's words. Okay. And that highlighted something to me. So be careful as an employee as well that you're not trying to use the law to create a stumbling block for your own employer, because at the end of the day, if your employer is wise, your employer is going to see the stumbling block and you're going to stumble over the very same block you placed for them. Okay, so be careful. But let's talk about the legal framework. So we have multiple acts which speak into our ability to manage our schools and our employees. And these are specifically the frameworks and acts that would speak into mental health. So we have the Constitution. And at the end of the day, remember, everybody has the rights to dignified, equal, fair labor practices. An important part of this is that mental health conversations must always be approached with dignity, and the employee does not need to lose dignity while they are struggling. Okay. The second part of the framework is the Labor Relations Act 66 of 1995. The LRA becomes particularly important when an employee's health begins affecting their ability to perform their work. This is where we start talking about incapacity due to ill health or injury. And one of the most important principles is this: incapacity and misconduct are not the same thing. If somebody is struggling because of illness, the employer needs to consider whether this is actually an incapacity rather than simply treating the employee as a disciplinary matter. Let's say that again, just in case you didn't hear it. When an employee is struggling with mental health matters, this is when the employer needs to consider whether it is actually an incapacity matter requiring accommodation instead of simply making the employee a disciplinary problem. You cannot deal with mental health situations in a disciplinary manner. I know many of us want to because it affects the schools and we have adult to child ratios. and we have parents that come down on us like tons of bricks and they're expecting a certain level of service, but you cannot have an employee feeling that they are a disciplinary problem when they're dealing with mental health. Okay. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act 75 of 1997. The BCEA regulates matters including sick leave and proof of incapacity. Employers have legitimate rights to manage sick leave and require appropriate medical certification where the law permits. Remember, you have the right to inquire. Okay. In specifically one of my accommodations, I actually had to email the doctor and ask the doctor, is this a matter of incapacity? The young lady has disclosed her mental health to the school, and there is a process of accommodation happening, and we're busy implementing it. But I see she's back with you because I've received a medical certificate. And I need to know if it was sick leave needed based on the mental health aspect without overriding her dignity, without stepping into that place where you are asking the wrong questions because it can get you in trouble. But saying to the doctor, was it illness? Was it um, bronchitis? Or was it this? Or was it that? Or was it her mental health? What was it? Because you can't simply say, but you weren't sick yesterday, so how are you sick today? Because when someone is dealing with anxiety, let me tell you, the psycho the psycho side of it can create physical, very real um feelings. Sorry. Like I used to get stomach cramps. And I'm talking about all the way from high school through varsity. I used to want to curl up and howl of pain. Okay. Bascapan was my friend all the way. It didn't work, I'm going to tell you. But the reality is that the symptom was there. Didn't mean the symptom wasn't there. It just meant my anxiety had overwhelmed me so much that there needed to be a symptom for my body to create a ability to process my anxiety. Because I wasn't processing it in a mental health or a soul side of it. I was now hiding it, and my body needed a way to process it. So it became stomach issues. Okay. And very real, I can tell you, very real. Okay. So the act actually stipulates that we can ask doctors, give us clarity without overstepping the rights of the employee. Okay. So, with that in mind, what you need to know is that sick leave management also needs to be fair and consistent. So, we can't allow one employee to take 30 days off in 1 month for something and continue the process in 6 months' time because we feel sorry for them. So, every employee has the right to 30 days sick leave in a 3-year cycle. Okay, simple, easy. But we often, as employers, think because when somebody says to me it is a mental health, we go into the shame stage of things. And then when they come and they go, I need to go off, I'm not feeling well, we go, shame. I'm not going to make it sick leave. I'm not going to make it sick leave because shame. But the reality is that is also showing the rest of your team and your employees that you are not consistent because you can't have shame with one and not ach shame with the 18 others. Okay, so be careful on that. Okay, sick leave is intended for circumstances where an employee is unable to work because of sickness or injury. Does it mean that mental health is not a sickness? Does it mean it's not an injury? No. But it does require fairness and consistency. It isn't an unlimited mechanism to avoid workplace obligations. So, on that, please note, I'm not saying that mental health is a mechanism to avoid doing your work. Um, Although I do think some people have the ability to use mental health as an excuse. I am not saying mental health is an excuse. Okay. We all have had that one colleague or that one employee that does this. Achoo! Oh, I'm sick. I'm sick. I need to go. I'm going to be booked off for 5 days because I now have pneumonia on one sneeze. We've all had that one person. It's the way to not deal with the responsibility of the job, but it's not right. Okay, so understand it's you as the employer need to be fair, you need to be consistent, and you need to manage leave effectively. Okay. The Employment Equity Act 55 of 1998. So the Employment Equity Act is very important when it comes to mental health aspects because it states clearly that mental or psychological conditions may fall within the framework of disability. I'm going to say that again. The Employment Equity Act particularly states that mental or psychological conditions may fall within the framework of disability. So while you are managing sick leave, while you are managing consistent and fair, remember that you need to be open to the discussion at some point that your employee's mental health has now become a disability. Okay. The important thing is that employers should not simply focus on a diagnosis, and we need to consider what is the impact of the impairment on the employee's ability to work and what reasonable accommodation could potentially remove or reduce the workplace barrier. So, that at the end of the day is what accommodation does it removes barriers for the employee. Okay. It should also not add barriers for you as an employer. Accommodation is a parallel road which removes barriers for both employee and employer. Because where you are struggling as an employer with the employee not being able to perform, the employee is struggling with a psychological, I want to say psychosocial the whole time, my apologies, psychological condition, which is creating a barrier for them not to perform. So you need to remove a barrier for everybody to be able to perform in a conducive manner. Okay. The Occupational Health and Safety Act 85 of 1993. So the OHSA actually plays quite a big role in mental health, illness, communicable diseases. And I don't often think this is something that employers think about, but it does. Okay. So we have the OHSA, and the OHSA manages health and safety. Okay. And often we immediately think about the physical aspects of safety and health, but we forget about the mental aspect of it. Okay. And this is where we would need to look at things like conflict management, um, workplace bullying, harassment, grievances. They would fall under the OHS Act. Okay. And often as employers, we don't see that side of the OHS Act because we're really actually looking at the physical side of things. Please remember it is a act which manages how we manage the workplace, ensuring it is safe. And safe is not just physical, safe is psychological. Okay. The Code of Good Practice on Prevention and Elimination of Harassment in the Workplace. Strangely, and this is something that I think I had to sit and really think about when we were looking at this webinar, is that a lot of our psychological issues that creep up in the workplace come from workplace bullying and harassment. And therefore, as employers, we really need to step away from the glib statement that we make saying we care about mental health or we stand for psychologically safe environments. Our schools are psychologically safe. But when social media is off, then we're screaming like mad, crazed people at our employees. We're calling them names. We're definitively breaking them down. Okay. That is not psychologically safe and that is not safe. If an employee is experiencing harassment or bullying in the workplace, it is your responsibility as an employer to actually deal with it. Okay. So it means that you need to sit, observe, and ask the following: how are people treated in my school? How is conflict managed in my school? How is bullying dealt with in my school? Let's take that one a little bit further. How do I allow parents to treat my teachers and my staff in my school? How are workloads managed? How is sick leave handled? What conversation do I have with an employee when they let me know they are sick? I'm not talking about when we've picked up misuse of sick leave. I'm talking about in the standard. What conversation are we having with our employees? How is reasonable accommodation considered? How do managers speak to employees? And whether people, or let's take the word people out, your employees feel safe to raise concerns. If your employees don't feel safe enough to raise concerns with you, you do not have a psychologically safe or a safe workplace. Say this. Sorry, not sorry. But if your employees can't come to you and say to you, hey, I'm struggling with this situation. I know it may seem petty, but it is creating a concern for me, and I don't know how to deal with it, and I need some advice from you, or I need some active participation from you as my employer, and you don't allow them to raise it, you are the problem, not the employee. Psychological safety is created through systems and behavior, not slogans. This is something I've asked myself. I personally actually think this question has kept me awake on multiple nights. Okay. And it's generally when I've seen on Facebook teachers saying, hi, I'm dealing with some stuff in my classroom. Or this is my favorite one. I don't feel like I can voice my opinion in a staff meeting. Those are normally the times I start questioning, why are our teachers dealing with so much pressure? Not only that, 90% of the time when I do positive behavior management classes, when I um, train staff in schools on how to deal with dysfunctional behavior in the classroom, what comes out a lot of the time is it's not always the children that are troublesome, difficult, and things like that. It is the external environment overwhelming the classroom. And when you start asking what external environment, you start hearing about parents and how parents communicate, and parents expect answers at 8, 9 o'clock at night, and how parents will demand that you be nice to their child because, you know, um, they are busy working and they can't parent. And the best part is we've even titled it. We've called it gentle parenting. And sadly, that is one of the largest problems in our sector is that the home life has just gone whoop, straight into the classroom. And I probably have some discussions on that, but those aren't for today. Okay. Today we're dealing with mental health, and today I'm going to stay rather focused on this. Okay. So I specifically want to discuss the why our workplace as educators, all the way from the ECD sector. Please, high school teachers, don't think that ECD teachers have any less stress than you do. Let me tell you, when that parent goes, my child has lost their juice bottle and I am demanding that you pay it back. Let me tell you, your stress levels go from 0 to 100. Okay. You may feel it when parents are going, my child is not being successful in your classroom. They are not passing their maths. And I know my little darling angel is a A-class student and you are not teaching them appropriately and your stress levels go 0 to 100. We're all dealing with this. Yeah, I get the parents' voices down. I hear enough of them. Okay, so I've gotten it down to a great ability. Okay, educators aren't working in a normal workplace environment. We don't have normal 9 to 5 jobs. Sorry, if nobody noticed that, we might need to be very open and honest about it. Yes. Okay, this is an argument that needs to sort of be added in here. Lots of parents say to me, but teachers get school holidays. Hi, sis man, do you know how hard our teachers work? Is normally my answer. Do you know that our teachers sit with, sometimes, depending on the schooling environment you are in, from 20 to 70 and 80 learners all functionally engaging with you in a second by second situation? Our teachers are dealing with so much decision making that it is like being in a war zone. Psychologically, that is what teaching feels like and is actually described like. And then parents go, but you get school holidays. And worst of all is when that argument gets added, is that parents don't know that during school holidays, teachers are probably marking, if we're talking about the primary schools and high schools, teachers are probably marking, they're preparing for the next term, they're doing training courses, they are doing, if they have to do extramurals, they're doing training on the extramurals. Some even do extramurals in the school holidays to prep, such as hockey and rugby and things like that. Not my world, okay? I don't do sports, so bless your souls for the teachers that are working in holidays. You may think the teachers go on holiday and go and a lot of the times, let me tell you, when you get the opportunity to go away, there's probably a couple of school books, planners, preparations, definitely colored pencils, highlighters, stationery that go with. Okay. It's not as simple as what the world out there believes. It's not. Okay. If your kids, okay. When parents come to me and say, the teacher isn't doing an effective job in the classroom, I my first question is, and I've probably stunned enough principals on this. I ask, can you cope with your child at home? Are you able to actually deal with your child for 24 hours, 7 days a week without complaining or without raising a concern to the parent, to anybody? No. That's why you like school times, because you can send them to teachers and somebody else has to deal with them. So at the end of the day, understand, dear teacher, I understand. Okay. Maybe it doesn't always look like it when you have to sit in disciplinary hearing with me or disciplinary counseling or performance meetings, but I do understand. Okay. Children come into classrooms with their own experiences, their own home life issues, their own personalities, their own developmental needs, their own behavioral challenges, their own emotional needs. And sometimes we can turn around and say that little monster in the class just needs love, but sometimes it's not just love they need. Okay? And educators are not only expected to teach, they are expected to deal with everything else. They are also expected, and let's put it down. You know, it was easy to say everything else, but let's put it down. They have to manage children's behavior, they have to communicate with parents, sometimes not such nice parents. They have to complete assessments. They have to complete administrative tasks. They have to meet curriculum requirements. They have to attend staff meetings. They have to manage classroom documentation. They have to deal with conflicts. They have to support learners emotionally. They have to attend training. They have to meet deadlines and increasingly deal with complex learner needs. That last point actually came up in one of the WhatsApp groups that I'm on, and a school owner actually raised the concern saying that throughout the years of her running schools and teaching, she has not seen the like the type of behavioral and emotional issues in children that we are seeing now. Okay. And let me tell you, she hasn't been teaching for 5 years or 6 years. She's been doing a good 2 decades. So her experiences come with 2 decades and more of changes. To be precise, I think she told me she qualified in the 90s. Yes. So here's the thing. So she started with her teaching prac in the 90s. She then started teaching in the early 2000s, or like in the 90s, 2000s. She's gone to 2010 to 2020, and we're now in the next. My word, that's like a whole range of different stuff that she's had to deal with. Okay. And she said it. What she dealt with in the 90s and early 2000s is not what we're dealing with now. And it was nice to have somebody actually say it because I myself qualified around about 2000. Okay. And the kids of then are not the kids of now. Okay. Which is sad because many of our teachers are leaving because of the kids of now, which means at some other point we need to admit that we failed society because the kids that we have now were brought up with the kids that we taught then. Okay. Oops. Okay. And then we sometimes ask us, why are teachers burnt out? Perhaps the question is this: what are we expecting one person to carry? What are we expecting our grade 12 educators to carry? Because I know there's schools that actually add pass rates to performance appraisals. Like you are being held accountable for a learner walking into an exam and passing it with a certain distinction. Hi, sis man, if my educators had to rely on my ability to write an exam, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of you that did not get performance bonuses. I'm sorry. I do apologize because I didn't like exams. I went into an anxiety crash. So shame. Imagine they had to be held liable for my ability to write an exam. Cease. Okay. There's also something very unique about education: the emotional labor of caring. I don't know how many of our teachers actually care anymore because they're overwhelmed, but there is the labor of caring. Okay. And educators are expected to care deeply. Lately, I've been feeling like a lot of our teachers just come into this as a job. It's just another office job. You get a salary, and that's that. But the reality is there needs to be this level of deep caring for our learners. Okay. And sometimes we forget that professionals also need care. So while they're caring, somebody needs to care for them. While you're filling up the buckets of kids, somebody needs to be filling up the educators' buckets. A teacher can leave a school physically at 4 o'clock and still be thinking about work and the classroom at 9 o'clock. Some of our teachers, and again, this might be more at primary school and high school. I'm not saying our ECD teachers don't experience this, but some of our teachers get home from teaching to their own families, which they push aside so that they can care about other people's families more. A little bit of a thought process there. Just a little thought process. There isn't always a clear psychological switch off point for our educators. There isn't always a clear physical switch off point for our educators because many of our educators are taking marking and planning home. Okay. And that can have a significant impact on their personal time. And we do need to acknowledge that there needs to be a work life balance. We do need to acknowledge in the discussion concerning mental health that there needs to be a balance between my work life and my home life. And when am I going to switch off work life so that I can be present with my family, present in my relationships with my family? We cannot expect educators to have great mental health if we as a sector are not allowing them to switch off and be grounded and present in the external aspects of their jobs, which are the very things that allow them to cope within their jobs. Okay. Can we expect our educators to perform at a high level while not acknowledging their human limits? And this is where I think employers sometimes become nervous, because if I acknowledge someone's mental health difficulties, am I expected to excuse poor performance? Because that's the question. If an employee comes to me and says, I'm dealing with, am I expected to accept bad performance? No, not expected to. Okay. So being understanding does not mean abandoning performance standards. And at the same time, saying we still need to find a way for essential duties of the position to be performed. Those two statements can exist together. I care, but I require can always coexist. Okay. In fact, I think it's one of the most important messages today. In this webinar, I can support you, but I expect of you to perform. They will always coexist in one environment. Okay? Compassion does not mean the absence of accountability. The objective should be support the person without abandoning the purpose of the job. If educators need accommodation, that does not automatically mean you don't have to do your job anymore or you don't need to perform. Instead, the conversation becomes, what barriers are preventing you from performing the inherent requirements of your position, and what reasonable measures could remove or reduce those barriers? That is a much healthier conversation. I'm going to take you to my last accommodation. So many preschools, okay, so here our high school teachers and our primary school teachers might have a bit of a giggle, but we have challenges in the ECD sector. So many, because our preschools are open a lot earlier than primary schools and high schools, and parents require preschools to be open much later for childcare services and things like that. What often happens is we need to set up schedules. And a lot of schools like this three schedule process of one employee or two employees start really early. Then within the next 45 minutes, the next group of employees, right? And then we have the last group, and we do the same. We schedule the exit times as well. Or some schools have this week is the early week and that week is the late week. Or we have 2 days. You can see it gets very complicated. But for somebody who is dealing with a psychological condition, having the up and down hours doing this may also affect their mental health. So sometimes when an employee comes and says, I am struggling and need accommodation, it may not be the even needing a pat on the shoulder and a tissue. It may just need the looking at the hours and how it will work for them. Because some employees who are dealing with anxiety and psychological issues need stability and grounding. So it allows for them, if they're working very long hours in one week and earlier hours the following week, it allows them to ground within that week. It gives them 5 days to function instead of 1 day on, 1 day off, or 2 days on, 1 day off. It does become challenging, but those are the questions we need to ask. Okay. So when does mental health issues become an incapacity matter? This is one of the questions I know many principals ask and school owners ask as well. When does it become an incapacity matter? In my world, it's simply this. When an employee comes to you and says, I am dealing with mental health issues and I need assistance, at that point, that's when it becomes an accommodation matter. That's when, in some sense, it becomes an incapacity matter, because incapacity doesn't mean I am dismissing you or I am letting you go or I'm ending your contract. Incapacity means at that point, we need to look at what barriers there are, what barriers can we remove, what accommodations we can put into place, and how we can assist the employee to function with a mental health concern. Okay. So a diagnosis by itself does not answer the employment question. The real question becomes this: how does the condition affect the employee's ability to perform the inherent requirements of the job? So if you are expecting, and I think ECD is a bit of a challenge here, because we don't always have set schedules. So I sort of want to more touch on like a primary school, high school educator. They have a set schedule, they have classes, they have meetings, they have trainings, they have sports. So at what point do we look at what barriers there are? So it might be that doing sports at till 6 o'clock at night, and the teacher getting home late, and then still needing to prep and mark for the next day creates that barrier. So maybe removing the sports aspect of it and allowing them to just sit and do their marking and planning will remove the barrier. So we need to look at that. From an ECD side, it's the what is causing the concern. So one of my incapacity matters actually wasn't a mental health matter, it was a physical matter, a physical health matter. And it was requiring that we had to ask the questions of where is the educator not able to perform her job. And in her case, it was a physical disability, and the physical disability was creating massive concerns within the classroom. Okay. And it needed to be the discussion of, and along with her physical disability, obviously came the anxiety, because she had constant performance meetings because she wasn't performing. So it became constant. So until we sat down and said, hey, what is the problem? What is the doctor saying? What are you feeling? It became the ability to ask, should it be an incapacity matter, or does accommodation become needed, or how do we go through this process? Okay. So when we are saying incapacity, we're not immediately, one, saying dismissal. Two, it's when the employee's ability to perform is becoming challenged and there is barriers affecting the employee's performance in the job. Okay, so for example, can the educator perform teaching duties? Because ultimately, if you're a teacher, I think you need to be able to teach. So if your mental health ability is creating a concern on teaching, we need to discuss. Okay. That discussion may not be again completely removing from the class. It may be looking at how can I lessen your days of work. So your teaching would happen on maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, Friday, you take your accommodation to go for your mental health treatments and things like that. And we will have other activities on a Thursday or Friday, or we'll have a substitute in on the Thursday and Friday. Those are things that obviously would need to be discussed. Can the employee or can the educator safely supervise learners? If they are unable to safely supervise learners, again, the question needs to be coming, can they do their job? Okay. Can they manage their classrooms? Can they attend to work consistently? Again, that word consistently comes up. Consistently, we are asking, can they perform in a consistent manner? Like, we're not going to have this throughout the day. Okay. Can they perform their administrative duties? So can they plan? Can they write observations? Can they do their reports? Okay. Can they communicate appropriately with learners, parents, and colleagues? If they're going to be screaming at learners, are they able to perform? If they're going to be creating conflict with colleagues, are they able to perform? If they're going to be snappy and snippy with parents, are they able to perform? Is the limitation temporary? Okay, so occasionally when we're looking at things like grief and stress and things like that, once we've removed the barrier may be the very thing that's created the need for the incapacity. Once we have removed that barrier, the incapacity is no longer there, and therefore it may be a temporary incapacity. Okay, is it recurring? So, as much as we don't always like to admit this, but mental health can also be seasonal. Okay, um, we see a lot more mental health concerns in months such as winter because it's dreary, it's cold, people don't want to get out of bed and things like that. So we do see that can